Hey guys, Shanti Phillips here with February 6th DVD update. I talk about all the DVDs and Blu-rays I've gotten over the last 2 weeks or so. Like I always say, guys, if you enjoyed these updates, definitely give this video a thumbs up. Leave me comments below what you guys thought of the titles I checked out in this update, any future titles you guys would like me to review for future updates, and some of the things you guys have picked up recently. The first one I got from Shout Factory, Scream Factory line is a new movie called Hellions. Which is a really trippy, weird, out there movie because it's like the second half of this movie, it kind of has like a vibe of almost like going into like the Wizard of Oz a little bit. And it kind of even like shows at one point the book of the Wizard of Oz, right when things start to take that kind of turn. You see that on the dresser in the house that the girl's in. But basically it's about this girl who finds out that she's pregnant, goes back to her house. It's on Halloween. She doesn't know what she's going to do, and she also doesn't know how she's going to, because she doesn't really seem like she wants to keep the kid, but if she, you know, in order to actually have an abortion, she'd have to tell her parents, and she doesn't want to do that. She's kind of like stuck between not knowing what she's going to end up doing, and that night, she starts to see these like trick-or-treaters, these weird kids that are coming to the door, and they're very strange, and then once this happens, it kind of goes into this weird, like I said, this otherworldly thing of the kids coming by, and then wind going around and all these kind of strange. It kind of reminded me of this one movie that Eddie Furlong was in that I feel like hardly anyone saw called Stitch. It kind of had that similar kind of vibe, where it was like all kind of like, they did kind of effects of the picture and gave it this weird, like real gloom thing and like kind of a pink kind of tint to the picture and all this kind of stuff. But like I said, it's basically though, you don't know what is real and you don't know what's happening, and I don't know, I kind of like that. It was like I said, it was a creepy, it was a different kind of movie than I was thinking it was going to be. Like I said, the second these weird kind of kids come up to the house, the weird things start to happen. And you know, Robert Patrick's in this movie as the cop, and he, you know, is kind of checking in and things like that. But I think this is worth watching. I said it's a different kind of movie and not like a real typical kind of thing. And like I said too, it has that sort of kind of fairy tale-ish kind of vibe to it in the movie. The next one is a new zombie film, an Asian zombie film, and it's funny, they have two different versions on here. Like they have a dubbed version, but see, like half the movie was already in English, but it was weird because they dubbed over even the parts that were in English. So I would say, no matter what, just watch the version, the Mandarin version, because I said it has a lot of English in it as well, because it was strange, like I said, because they dubbed over the parts that were already in English. But the movie's called Zombie Fight Club. And it's a zombie movie that's basically set inside this kind of crumbling apartment complex. And you see these guys that are kind of like the bad guys in the building, and they kind of invite over all these like kind of prostitutes and stuff like that. And they all, like, one of them seems sort of sick, and they see something's wrong with her eye and her face is something the matter, and she ends up attacking the one, and then basically causing this zombie outbreak in this apartment complex building. And it's about the people who are in there, and, you know, the people who are kind of trying to get out of this building. You know, it talks about, you know, Fight Club on the top. You know, the movie's called Zombie Fight Club, and you see, like, it's, like, involves zombies and fighting and things like that. And that does happen in this movie, but that's, like, way at the end of the movie when it comes, because it kind of, like, becomes a whole other movie after, like, an hour in. Then it becomes, like, a whole different kind of movie. But I like it, like, my favorite stuff really was all the stuff in the apartment complex about the people who are in there and these kind of quirky types and stuff like that, trying to, you know, because there were, like, a lot of weird people who were like living in the building and things like that, and you see all the kind of prostitutes and stuff like that who've been infected going around and like killing the people in the building, and then like making more zombies and like turn this whole building into like a zombie, like I said, total outbreak. It's a fun kind of quirky, kind of remind me a little bit of that one zombie movie called Bio-Zombie, which I always really liked. It was kind of a you know, an Asian knockoff of Dawn of the Dead, but I always really loved that movie. That's one I really hope comes to Blu-ray at some point. But it kind of had that kind of humor vibe to it, and it's like the kind of, the cops are coming into the building to try and get the gangs, the bad guys out, because they originally come there to get the bad guys, and then of course they go there when this is happening, and then they're turning into zombies. So it's kind of like a survival thing. It has on here though a feature on the stunts of this movie in the theatrical trailer. The next one from Universal, and this is one of my favorite horror movies of, you know, 2015. You know, from Guillermo del Toro directed this, and a really cool old school throwback haunted house film, and one that like I said, I would highly recommend you guys check out. Really love this movie, and it's called Crimson Peak, and it's basically about this girl who ends up meeting this guy. You know, she's working with her father, and she meets this guy who, something about him seems rather weird, and the father doesn't really seem to trust the guy and things like that, and you see something happens to the father, and the father ends up getting this brutal death, and then the girl ends up marrying this guy and going to his house in the Crimson Peak area. And of course, when she goes there with him, that's when the creepy, weird things start happening to her in this house, and she's seeing spirits and things like that. It was, to me, like, it was an extremely well-made haunted house, kind of creepy, kind of spirits trying to either warn this girl or what they're trying to do. What is happening and why is she seeing these people? And it kind of had like a vibe of like, I couldn't figure out exactly, like, basically it was one of the examples of a movie like this that was done extremely well, because they make a lot of these kind of haunted house kind of creepy atmosphere movies, and some of them really don't work, and I've seen a lot of them that don't work, or I really lose the interest, or they just don't capture the vibe of like a real 70s, 80s, kind of more 70ish kind of gothic horror movie. It's very much like in the vibe of like a Hammer horror movie, like the haunted house ones, and this has that kind of feel to it. It has on here though a bunch of Blu-ray exclusives, some featurettes in the movie, deleted scenes, making of the movie, a commentary track. But if you want to see a cool haunted house movie, creepy vibe that I thought really works, definitely check out this one. The next one from Sony. This is one that I had not heard a whole lot about. I saw the cover and was really interested in seeing this. It's got really good cast, and there's a lot of people who are from the Perks of Being a Wallflower. Vanessa Hudgens is in this movie, but the main one, who's like the brother with the long hair in Perks of Being a Wallflower, is in this. Mackenzie Davis, who is in The Awkward Moment, and she was recently in The Martian, is in this movie. And it's basically it's called Freaks of Nature. It's like something has happened in this kind of town, and they're all kind of living all together, and it's like the zombies live there, the vampires, and then the regular humans that are not infected, and they're all kind of living together in this kind of community. The zombies are all pretty much brain dead, and they kind of keep them with these things in their necks so they can't attack people, and then people are kind of getting turned into vampires if they date the vampire, and then they suck their blood and turn into vampires. But it's basically about they're all kind of together, and all of a sudden they see these alien ships outside, and they believe when the alien ships come, it causes them all to have this huge fight with each other, and they all are no longer getting along. And these three friends that were all friends kind of come together and try and put their differences aside and kind of try and survive from these aliens that are kind of coming and like making these people disappear. I don't know. I really liked this movie. I thought it was really funny. A lot of cameos in this movie. I don't know. It was just really fun to me. I really dug this movie. It kind of has like the vibe of a little bit like a Zombieland kind of thing, mixed with Shaun of the Dead kind of feel. But to me, really worked. It was just silly. I like these kind of silly kind of movies, and a little bit too of My Boyfriend's Back from the Dead kind of feel a little bit to this, but it's called Freaks of Nature. But it has on here a gag reel, deleted scenes, and an alternate opening. But if you want to see like a fun kind of zombie mixed with werewolf, mixed with aliens and all that kind of stuff together, watch this one. The next one from Sony as well. And this is a movie called, and this is based on a true story, and it's I didn't hear too much about this one, but it's basically called Truth, and it has Cate Blanchett, Robert Redford, and Topher Grace in this, and Dennis Quaid. It's about basically was it CNN or I think it was, I can't remember which network it was, but it was basically the news network, a real thing, where they were about to publish this story right around when George W. Bush was running for president again for the second term. I think it was the second. Was it first? I think it was the second. What year was this? Was it 2004, the election? And he was basically, they were trying to threaten to let this information out because they've heard these tips that George W. Bush kind of got out of the war, and he basically, like the 2 years that they said he was there, he didn't do it, and his father was kind of like hiding him out, and he really wasn't during the war. And they're kind of, the Newsweek team is kind of like, this news group is trying to try and like look into the facts and kind of investigate this whole thing. And the whole thing kind of, like I said, was a true story and cost a lot of them their jobs and had all these kind of issues for them. But that's essentially what this is basically them kind of putting together the pieces and trying to see if there was any truth to what this was. A really well-acted movie, but No, it's only the kind of movie if you're really interested in this kind of story and like political kind of things and real news, topical kind of things. But it has on here though Q&A with Cate Blanchett and the cast, commentary track. But for what it was, I thought it was interesting. Well made. Always liked Cate Blanchett. Really loved her in Carol recently. The next one from Broad Green Pictures. And this is a really good movie that kind of, I feel like, went under the radar. And I feel like a lot of people didn't see this movie, and had a kind of a small release. And this was really, really good. Stars Andrew Garfield and Michael Shannon and Laura Dern. It's called 99 Homes. And it's basically set to the whole thing when houses were kind of being... And it's still going on now. It's basically people who kind of buy these houses at these cheap prices. But Michael Shannon he basically goes into when people are losing their homes and says that he's going to basically put his name on the lease and then take over their house right when it gets... So he works for the banks. It's really hard to kind of explain exactly what he's doing, but he's like taking over these houses and kind of... People are paying him like rent. They're kind of like renting out their own houses from him because he's like, he's just kind of these schemes that he's doing. And Andrew Garfield's character is basically losing his house in the beginning of this movie. And he sees Michael Shannon come in and being with the bank and taking over the house and what he's doing and what he does. And he basically ends up working for him and going in and kind of doing what he did, which was going with the bank and like possessing these houses. And he doesn't want to tell his mother what he's doing because he knows how much this was bad for the mother. And he's basically doing this to try and get enough money back to actually buy back his house. And that's essentially what it is. But he's doing some real crooked things with Michael Shannon's character, and there's some really bad stuff going on with what he's doing. But as on here, a commentary track on the movie, but a really, really well-acted movie. Really sad, too, because you feel really bad for these people and what's happening in their houses and the scheming stuff that Michael Shannon's character is doing. Like I said, this is all based on a true story, too, because this stuff really was happening. But like I said, this is really under-the-radar movie, really worth checking out. The next one from 88 Films is the collection, Children of the Corn Trilogy. Hopefully down the line, too, they put the other ones, I'm hoping, because there was I can't remember how many they made. I think there was like 7 movies. But this has, the first 3 movies, and so like I said, this is the Children of the Corn Trilogy, and a pretty cool feature that they have on here, on the second movie, is they have on here the original work print of the movie, the first positive print of the movie, used during the editing process, which was pretty cool. They actually included that in here. If you guys haven't seen the Children of the Corn movies, it's basically, though, Stephen King wrote a short story for like the basis of these movies, and it's basically about this town of these children that have, sacrificed and killed all the parents to like to the god, the he who walks behind the rose. It's a very creepy concept. Linda Hamilton is in the first movie, and she basically is with her boyfriend going out there, and she's getting pretty much trapped out there with these bad, evil kids. The second one was people going to investigate what had happened to this town. The third one was about two of the kids that were from this town getting adopted, and they go into the inner city, and they basically are causing the ruckus in the city. I really like these movies. These are really, really cool movies. They always have kind of like mixed opinions, though. Some people like always say they don't love the Children of the Corn movies. I feel like with the Children of the Corn movies, you either enjoy these movies or you don't. It seems like there's no in between. And it's like people are, like I said, I always hear people kind of saying they don't love these movies, or people saying they absolutely love these movies. I actually really love these movies. I always remember too watching these off of... They were some of the earliest stuff I remember taping on VHS and then watching like the real edited versions off of like things like Up All Night and things like that. I always have the thing with like remembering these, and I love 88 Films that they put these in these red cases. But they have one here though too. Like I said, the work print on the second movie, and then Return to Children of the Corn. Look at the the making of the movie, extended finale, and that's on the third movie. And they also have on here an imminent celebration of the career of one of B-movie's most unrecognized, mavericks, basically on the producer of the film, and he worked on Two Moon Junction, which I loved. 88 Films put that out as well. It's an 83-minute documentary, but a really great set. And this is also, like I said, this is a Region B release. I don't think I said that, but this is a Region B release from the UK of this one, and I do have a Region Free player. I'm so glad I finally have that, so I can check these out. The next one And I didn't even know at the beginning when I saw this was coming out that this was the one with David Hess, because they don't promote too much that David Hess was in this movie, because Franco Nero was really, really popular and still is working to this day. But David Hess was in this movie. I think my favorite David Hess movie of all time was The House on the Edge of the Park. I love Last House on the Left, but House on the Edge of the Park was a really cool movie, and I think Down the Line is coming out soon from Code Red, I've heard. This movie is called Hitchhike, and like I said, David Hess is the star of this one as well. It's about a group of this couple that are going, on an RV kind of trip across the desert, and they end up seeing on the side of the road this guy who's like broken down with his car, and of course they let him in. It's David Hess's character, and basically David Hess is a criminal and really bad, and letting him into the car was a really bad decision. It basically makes their whole life a living hell of what's going on, and he's kind of like hitting on the wife, and it's a huge nightmare kind of thing. It has a kind of Last House on the Left kind of vibe to this. All these two, both the 88 films, the Children of the Corn ones, have great transfers. Really, really great transfer in this one as well. It has on here, though, the Italian language one and the English language one with the subtitles as well. And, the collectible postcard inside of here as well for the movie. I can't show that, though. But, like I said, it has the reversed artwork and things like that. But really cool. Another one of the lesser-known ones. Now this one is from Alchemy, and I see so many found footage movies, and there's so many bad, terrible found footage movies. This was one of the best found footage movies I've seen in a long time, and the creepiest concept of a movie that I've ever seen for a really long time is called Hangman, starring Jeremy Sisto, who I've been a fan of for a long time. Loved him in 6 Feet Under. As he said, it's called Hangman, and it's basically about, the beginning of the movie, you see this family going to the airport, they're getting out of their car, then you see this kind of weird guy spying from his car on them, filming them, and he ends up going into their car, figuring out from their address, from their GPS, going into their house, and he goes in there and breaks in and puts cameras all around everywhere in this house. He puts them in their bedroom, he puts them, everywhere you can think of in this house, he puts them, these cameras, and he ends up walling himself into the wall. A little bit like, a Bad Ronald vibe, and also a little bit like that Gary Busey movie, Hide Her in the House. And he, walls himself in there and is basically spying on, when they come back, family comes back, and spying on this family, watching their every move, and like lurking around at night, and there's all these creepy things and weird things he's doing. It's an extremely creepy movie, and is very effectively done, because this is the kind of movie that could have fallen flat and really not worked. But to me, I was like I said, I've watched, for things to review and stuff like that, so many found footage movies, and so many of them I'm like, oh, the same. This was such a well-made one, and finally one that I thought was a little different and not the same, and actually really was genuinely creepy, the idea of someone, with GPSs and stuff like that, because you push the home button, and, that's a way people can figure out where you live, and it's a creepy thing, the idea that somebody coming in and putting all these cameras in your house and hiding in the ceiling like that, and lurking around at night, and knowing everywhere you are because he's watching, and he's in there crying in the walls, and he's up to no, it's really freaky when he's doing the walls and making these weird noises, and the kids are hearing things, saying like, why are you making all the noise above the attic and all that? It's a very cool movie. Another one, I just finished watching this now, and this was outstanding. This is Bernard Rose, who directed Candyman, and this was really cool because I think this is the second movie, I believe, that he did with Tony Todd. Tony Todd came back to work with him again. This movie is called Frankenstein. Now, don't think, oh, it's going to be the same Frankenstein thing. So that's what I thought when I was going in to watch this. I was worried it was going to be like the same Frankenstein thing that I've seen so many times. Because I saw Victor Frankenstein. It was a little different, which I liked. But this movie is called Frankenstein. It stars Xavier Samuel, Carrie-Anne Moss, Danny Houston, and Tony Todd. And like I said, it's called Frankenstein. But it's this very different Frankenstein movie. It's not the same kind of thing you've seen before. Totally reinventing it. It goes... the beginning of the movie, you see basically this like grown, probably like 20-something guy, basically on this table in this lab, and he's like a real good-looking, not like a gross kind of monster-looking kind of Frankenstein kind. It's not like that, but they bring him to life, and he's basically like a little child. She's talking to him like a child. Before he can really talk, and he's like a baby, and just opening his eyes, and But they're talking to this guy who's the Frankenstein's monster, because Frankenstein is not the monster. Frankenstein is the creator, the doctor. The monster is actually the monster. People always think that Frankenstein is the monster. It's not. But he's basically, though, and something starts to go wrong with him that they've created. He starts getting all these sores on them, so they end up basically realizing that this experiment has not worked. They send him to basically kill him, put chemicals and things like that to kill him. Of course, it doesn't work. He ends up getting loose and going out into the city, and it's this whole nightmare of a situation, what he does when he goes out into the world, and he ends up not knowing his own strength, and people end up getting killed along the way. Tony Todd plays a blind homeless man in the movie, and he was actually singing the blues and singing in this was really great songs and stuff like that. I don't think I had ever heard him in a movie singing, at least as far as I can remember, and he was really good in this, really cool in this movie, and it was this whole stuff of what happens to him when he goes out there, and it's such a brutal movie. It's such a violent movie about how these people treat him and what ends up happening, and him doesn't, because he's like a child. He's like a 1 year, the mind capacity of a little kid. A little child doesn't know what he's doing when he goes out in this world. And like I said, it's not the typical kind of movie. And what happens, I legitimately was impressed with this and thought this really worked. And the next one from Well Go USA was another really cool movie, and it was in the beginning of the movie you see this couple who are on a trip, and he's driving on this motorbike and ends up getting into an accident because he's driving the car and he goes the other lane and another car is coming, and the girlfriend ends up getting thrown off the bike and she gets really injured terribly, and she ends up having to go back with her boyfriend to see her family, who she hasn't seen in years. She basically left her family 5 years ago, but after the accident she's in a wheelchair trying to recover, and she's lost her memory. She remembers nothing about her accident, anything about before, so when she goes back to the family, she doesn't really even remember them at all. She doesn't remember why she left them, but there was a reason she left, and the family keeps hinting at this, and they don't have any clue what's going on. And the family is really strange to the boyfriend, really wants him to leave, and essentially something happens. The boyfriend is gone, and then she's stuck there with this family that is extremely controlling, extremely mean and cruel and cold to her, and it's kind of figuring out what is going on with his family and why are they like this and why are they so peculiar, and the brother is saying all this weird sexual stuff to her, and it's very peculiar, and I don't know, I thought this was really creepy movie. This update has a lot of cool movies in it. Like, some updates are just kind of, as I say, turned down. This update has some really cool stuff, and this is another one that I really thought was very creepy, and very impressed with this. And what's funny is too, the parents in this movie were both together in a movie, in Trainspotting together, because I looked them up because I knew I had seen them in other things, and the father is so creepy in this. It was a really cool movie. The next one from Cinedigm is a movie called Extraordinary Tales, and this has the DVD and Blu-ray of this, and it's basically it's more for kids, of Edgar Allan Poe's stories, and it's different animators that have kind of animated the segments like The House, The Fall of Usher, The Raven, and it basically features the voices of a bunch of people here: Christopher Lee, Bela Lugosi, Julia Sands, Guillermo del Toro is one of the narrators in this, Roger Corman does a voice in this. And like I said, it's basically different animators doing their kind of takes on the Edgar Allan Poe stories and bringing them to life with different kind of styles and cool kind of animation, and they're all kind of have different kind of vibes and different looks to them, and it's basically like an anthology though of all the different stories, some of the most known ones, with really great voice acting and stuff like this. And one of the last things I believe that Christopher Lee did, at least one of the last ones that's I believe being released, I'm pretty sure about that, because I'm pretty sure. And it has on here, though, The Art of Extraordinary Tales, The Making of Extraordinary Tales, and a commentary track with the director. The next one, this is a limited edition one from Twilight Time. This is the Jack Nicholson movie, which I had never watched before, called The Last Detail. This is one of the limited edition. One's limited to 3,000 units, and this was really cool movie, which I don't know how I had never watched before. Like I said, it's The Last Detail. Randy Quaid is in this as well. It's basically Jack Nicholson and Otis Young, I believe, is the other actor, who ends up going, and they're in the Navy, and they get their detail, which is their duty to take Randy Quaid, who's a prisoner who tried to steal $50 from this charity, and they're giving him like I think 8 years in jail for it, and they have to basically take him to another state, which is, to get him there, to get him to the prison, to the Navy prison. And it's really sad because, Randy Quaid's character is like only 18 years old. He just got in there. He has a problem with stealing, and and he hasn't done anything. He's never drank a beer. He's never been with a woman. And Jack Nicholson is really kind of sad about this. So on the journey of trying to get him to the police station, to the jail, he wants to kind of give him a good time and get him a beer, get him laid with a woman. That's essentially what it is. And it's kind of all these situations that go along the way. And it's a very sad movie. But it also is, I think, one of Randy Quaid's greatest movies. And at least from seeing this, my definitely favorite performance-wise for him for this, and in Midnight Express, which he was like a terrible, mean guy in that. But this is a great transfer on this, and a really cool, I feel like a movie that not a lot of people have seen, or at least I haven't heard about as much as some other Jack Nicholson movies. This is a movie that I remember I bought the DVD this years ago, and I think I watched like 5 minutes of it, and then I was like, this is kind of strange, or something like that, and I don't think I ever watched it. And I don't know why, because this movie was so cool. And I want to talk to you about the transfer on this too, but it's called Luther the Geek. And sometimes I get dyslexic. I might say Luther the Greek, but no, it's Luther the Geek. And it's basically in the beginning of this movie, though, you see this kid who's seeing this kind of geek from like the freak show, and he ends up getting knocked over on the ground by the people who are watching this guy from the freak show, and all of his teeth get knocked out. And it's years later, and Luther the Geek has basically made these weird metal teeth. They're like something like out of Phantom of the Paradise, or something like Marilyn Manson would wear, like for a video, like these teeth. And he's basically like this crazy killer, and they let him out of jail for like committing these crimes, and he's going around and like biting people's necks and like pulling their veins. And you see him track this woman down to the supermarket, and he ends up going back to her house and then making it like a living nightmare for her and the daughter. And that's essentially what it is. And he's going around like going bah, 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 doing these crazy weird stuff going on. And it has on here though a brand new transfer, a 2K transfer to 35mm. I have to admit, the transfer on this, I don't know how Vinegar Syndrome does it. They legitimately do the best transfers I have ever seen, and I'm not saying that legitimately. I've never been so impressed with transfers in my life, and I never talk about transfers. The transfer for this movie looks like a movie that was shot yesterday. It looks like a new movie. And this is a movie that, from 1988, you would not think would look like this, would not think it would look this good. It has on here, though, commentary with the director, video interviews, and all the old transfer, features that were on the Troma release. But give this one a chance, guys, if you haven't seen this one. A very, very strange, creepy movie. Also, I love the scenes in the market, because it's like stepping back in like 88, and you looking what's on the shelves and stuff like that. I always love that. The next one, this is from the Warner Archive, and this is, Christopher Guest movie. And this is, I feel like this one isn't talked about as much as like Best in Show and Waiting for Guffman, but I like this one just as much, and I know he's finally doing a new movie, which I can't wait to see, but I don't think Eugene Levy is in it, which is like kind of sucks, because I always like Eugene Levy's characters the best in these movies. Like, he always steals the show in these movies. This one's called, same with Catherine O'Hara, but it's called A Mighty Wind. It's about these folk singers, and this kind of producer folk singers. In the beginning of the movie, you hear has died, and his son wants to put together this tribute for his father and get together some of the old acts that he managed. And so, this is done improv style, and like a documentary like Best in Show and the director's other movies. And he wants to get together the old folk singer acts that his father had managed, and they all basically haven't done anything in 30 years. They all pretty much have retired. Some of them see each other, other ones don't, and it's kind of the documentary about putting these people back together again, and them all planning to have this one big show for like a network like PBS, to have like a big concert. And they even have on here as a feature the concert, like the live broadcast stuff of this thing, like the whole sequence of how they put this together. But it's this whole ridiculous thing about them putting this together, and Eugene Levy's character really steals the show on this, and it's him getting back together with Catherine O'Hara's character, and they had this terrible breakup. in the movie, and they haven't seen each other in years, and it's really awkward. And I don't know. I really love this movie. Like, I don't think some people might like it as much as Best in Show, but I feel like this is one that went under the radar with his movies, and you don't hear about it as much. But I would definitely recommend you guys watch this. I really like his movies a lot. This one is from Olive Films. This is Amos and Andrew, and somehow this is one that I had never seen in my entire life, and I don't know how. It stars Nicolas Cage, Samuel L. Jackson, and Dabney Coleman. And I was watching this thinking like, oh, the music kind of reminds me of Clifford. And like I've said that a couple times when I'm watching things. I think this is kind of like the movie, the Clifford, the Martin Short movie. I looked it up, and finally for once I'm like, oh, it was the guy who did the music for Clifford, and it had Dabney Coleman in it as well. So 2 movies, and the guy did the music in this. And this was a fun movie. Like I said, I don't know how I had never watched this before, and it's basically Nicolas Cage and Samuel L. Jackson. Samuel L. Jackson moves into this really rich town. He's like a really rich guy. Moves into the town, and these kind of joggers are kind of walking through the neighborhood, and they see Samuel L. Jackson, moving. He went into the house, and he's like setting up his stereos and things like that, and they mistake him for a criminal because they're kind of a backwards town. And since Samuel Jackson's a black guy, they look at him and think like, oh, he couldn't afford to live here. And like I said, it's a real backwards kind of town, and they're all like that. So they see him in there, and they're like, oh, he couldn't afford to live here. They think he's a criminal. They call the police on him, and then the police all come, and they start like shooting at Samuel Jackson as he comes out because they set his car alarm off, and it becomes a huge thing. And then they come to discover that he has moved in, and he's one of the richest guys, and he is on like Forbes magazine and things like that. So then they come up with this plot of how are they going to fix this. So they talk to Nicolas Cage, who's in jail, and make it look like Nicolas Cage was the robber, and he was the one shooting at Samuel Jackson. It's kind of the whole thing of putting together this whole scheme about this, and it's kind of about what happens when Nicolas Cage goes into the house to try and rob Samuel Jackson, make it look like he was the one that shot him. It's a huge to-do about them putting together the thing. I like this. Like I said, I feel like this isn't one of those movies like that you don't hear about as much, but I thought Samuel Jackson and Nicolas Cage were great in this movie, and it was kind of, like I said, kind of sad too, because like the way this town was treating Samuel Jackson and stuff like that. Like I hate those kind of people, like backwards towns. It's like I never stand to go to those kind of towns and stuff like that, but it does fit, because it's like that's probably how they would act in places like that. But that's essentially what this one was. And this one, I hadn't seen this one in a long time. I remember really liking this one. It's like a kind of, I guess it's like a kind of a 1985 kind of movie, kind of like Gattaca a little bit, sort of, and like the island and that kind of feeling. It's called Code 46, and it's about something about like, well, if you can't, if you have like the same genetic code that matches in too much in certain ways, these people can't, reproduce together. And Tim Robbins goes to, and they have like these checkpoints in the land, and you can't pass these checkpoints unless you have these certain types of paper to get through. And Tim Robbins' character goes to investigate this fraudulent activity that's going on, and he has the ability to kind of read people's thoughts, and he can figure these things out. He comes to figure out that it's Samantha Morton's character that is doing this, but he ends up falling in love with her, and it's a huge to-do because they share the same genetic coding, and he can only be where she lives for a certain time, for a 24-hour period, because he has this past, and it's kind of like this love story that, is like, are they ever going to figure out how to be together and things like that. That's essentially what it is. The next one is another one I had never heard of, called Class, with Rob Lowe and Andrew McCarthy. Very early Andrew McCarthy movie, because Andrew McCarthy, I always think of him from, what was he from? From Mannequin, and I think he was in, Weekend at Bernie's. This is called Class, and it's, Andrew McCarthy's character goes to college, and his dorm mate is Rob Lowe, and Rob Lowe is kind of picking on him and like pulling all these kind of pranks on him. They're friends, but they're always kind of busting each other's chops and causing each other all these kind of problems. And something ends up happening with, Andrew McCarthy's character ends up sort of sleeping with Rob Lowe's mother, and because he's trying to get him to sleep with a woman, and he ends up getting with the mother, and it's this huge to-do thing, and them trying to cover it up. It's a really strange, seldom seen age line. Like I said, I think the thing that's kind of cool with Olive Films is like they put out stuff that I feel like people don't remember And it's cool to kind of see stuff again, because like I said, Amos and Andrew and some of these, I think Amos and Andrew, I think people sort of knew a little bit, but I hadn't heard about it as much. This one I feel like people had probably not seen, at least I had never heard of it ever. The next one, I can't explain this one too well, because I have only seen a couple episodes of this, but it's from Warner Brothers, and it's Lego. It's called Ninja Go, and it's Masters of Spinzo, Possession Season 5, and it's basically like Lego ninjas and kind of the adventures they go on and things like that. Like I said, it's really hard to me to explain. It's not done like, the stop motion animation kind of, Lego's done like CGI kind of ones, but it has on here 10 episodes on this. But I said there's also, 4 other seasons of this. But from what I saw, it was a fun kind of series, but definitely more of a kids kind of show. This one from Vertical Entertainment, and this is a cool movie starring Henry Rollins. Henry Rollins, I always liked him as an actor. I remember the first movie I saw him acting in. I know he's been in a lot of stuff. One of the first things I remember seeing him in was Wrong Turn 2, which he was really cool in that. And I always remember the first time I ever saw him in anything was his music video, I'm a Liar, when he was on Beavis and Butthead, when they were talking about that. I love that video. But this is a movie he was in called He Never Died, and it's an interesting movie. You see Henry Rollins, and he's kind of living in this apartment building. You see he's got these kind of scratches on his back, and it's kind of like, it kind of deals with some biblical senses to his character, but he's kind of like going around and kind of moping around in his apartment complex, and his daughter ends up kind of tracking him down and coming to see him, and there's kind of these bad characters around, and he's going around and he needs to get some kind of something from this kid that he's kind of buying. You don't know if it's drugs or whatever it is, but something ends up happening where the daughter ends up becoming kidnapped, and it becomes this thing about him trying to find him. It has some really violent stuff with him when he's kind of trying to get his daughter back, and when he's fighting these people, it takes these violent turns, and it's like, Henry Rollins is really cool in this movie. It's very, very hard to explain. Like I said, it has like some kind of biblical stuff to it with his character, and and this stuff with him with like blood, and you're wondering like what is with him, and he's like talking about being alive for all these hundreds of years, and I don't know, it was a really, really cool movie, really well acted from Henry Rollins. Definitely one of my favorite things I've seen him do. And like I said, that's from Vertical Entertainment. The next one, this is from MVD, and this was a 3D movie, a really silly kind of 3D movie called Coming At Ya, and it's called It's Back, It's Bigger, It's Better, and It's Coming At You. This is a 3D one. This also has the 2D one, and it's basically like a 3D Western movie, and it's like the alternate, like when you think of like 3D like gags and gimmicks, like the most I always remember is Muppet Vision 3D, because they're always like putting things right to the camera, and this is just like that. It's like putting the gun like right to the camera like this. Like the opening credits are insane, the stuff that they were doing, like putting like the shoe right in front of it. And there's these scenes when they would do like a black and white kind of effect of the cowboy and things like that. But it's basically a cowboy whose bride is kidnapped, and he's going on the mission to get his wife back, and all the kind of people he comes along the way. It's like I said, it's a cowboy western movie all in 3D, and it's all like super close to the camera, and these super crazy, insane kind of the most 3D gimmicky kind of 3D stuff you can think of. And that I kind of thought that was fun because it was ridiculous, over the top kind of thing. And like I said, this is called Coming At You, and has on here, it's from a 4K scan, so it looks really good. The next one from E1 is the second season of From Dusk Till Dawn, and this is basically the characters from the film, the two brothers, and it's kind of them. I saw some of the first season, and it's like them. They go back to the Titty Twister bar, and of course, that's where all the vampires are and things like that. When they lure the men in there, and they left there, and one character they left with was Selma Hayek's character. And there's also like kind of all the kind of situations they get into. One of the things I really wanted to see, this two reasons I wanted to see this as well, was because Demi Lovato was in this one, and she was with offhand I'm not remembering what his name was. Her real life boyfriend is in it. From that 70s show, but I really want to see that. She's in like 2 episodes of this. Not a huge part, but has on here though commentary track, a making of, a New York Comic Con panel from 2015, a sizzle reel featurette, a number of different features on that. The next one, this is from a company called 1-7 Movies, and this is called E.N.D. And it's an interesting kind of end of the world zombie movie because it goes and it like talks about like day one. It's an Italian film, and then it goes like day 150, 1466, day 2033. So it's like going from like the zombie situations where it first happens to like all these days, years later, and how it keeps getting worse, and it deals with one, which is like a couple out, a soldier and a pregnant woman out in the woods, and it's a whole thing about how it gets worse and how things have changed within all these different days or these different years of, what has happened in this thing. And that's essentially what it was. But this other one from the company, it was the director's other movie, because the director did a segment on this, but this one I loved. This was like a real art film called Red Crocodile, and it's actually about that real drug, crocodile. It's in Russia, and people like inject this, and they basically rot from it. It's a terrible thing. And I'm sure some of you guys have seen the pictures, those really gross pictures of people injecting it. Their legs are all messed up, and it's about a guy who's addicted to the crocodile, and he's going and he's basically totally addicted to this, and he's got all these sores on his arms, and it's all like a lot of inner monologue and these scenes of him in like meadows and things like that when he's happy, and he's kind of envisioning this, but the whole movie's set in this terrible, gross apartment room that's like rotten. When the room's rotten, he's rotting away, and it's really sad and really well acted. The guy looks so much like Bradley Cooper, like it's almost like if Bradley Cooper saw this guy in the morning, like he'd scream and think he saw himself, like he would think he saw his twin. Like this guy is like the biggest dead ringer I've ever seen of Bradley Cooper in my life. And it's just essentially this guy in his apartment, talking about it and trying to get off the drugs, but he's like kind of addicted and taken over his whole life. But really creepy movie and a sad movie, really, really well made. I said it's called Red Crocodile. The next one from Maverick Entertainment is Dead End. I've never seen a movie like this because it deals with like a ghost and like a killer at the same time. This guy has like this killer mask, and the ghost aspect is sort of strange because like you see the ghost kind of like appearing in spots, and I don't even think anyone was noticing the ghost was there, and like you'd have to really like point it out that it was a ghost because it's sort of just standing there in the corner, like in some of the scenes of like the party scenes and stuff like that. Essentially though, this girl who's like an investigator, like the paper, and she goes to investigate these people that were killed at this school. And at the same time, there's like I said, this killer in a mask going around and killing all these people. But then she's starting to see these ghosts. But it was kind of weird to blend it together like that with like the ghost and the killer. I think they're making like 2 more of these. It was kind of fun though. I liked it. Like I sat through the whole movie and I legitimately thought it was kind of cool, some of it. But it is a strange like thing of blending the two together like that. And the last one, cover the cover up so no one has anything to say, but it's the Pretty Peaches trilogy, and this is from Vinegar Syndrome as well. I reviewed the first movie before about a year or so back, but this is basically this girl who is kidnapped and like loses her memory. She's kidnapped by these 2 weird like bumbling guys, and like what they end up doing with her, and it's like all these great scenes in Vegas. The second one, the transfer on that was amazing. Like I said, Vinegar Syndrome, these transfers are amazing. I would love a documentary. I've talked about this before, like them talking about finding the prints and how they put them together, because like I said, they do some of the greatest transfers. The second one's transfer was really good too, and this one girl who goes to her uncle's, played by Ron Jeremy, and it's really ridiculous stuff going on with Ron Jeremy in this house and all these people there, and and the third one had a good, wasn't as good a transfer, but still a really good transfer. The second one though had the greatest transfer on this one. Like I said, this is the Pretty Peaches trilogy. These are more adult films though. These are definitely adult films. But anyway though, guys, that's all for this DVD Blu-ray update. Like I always say, guys, thanks again for watching and subscribing, and if you guys like these videos, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.